Good morning. Today we are going to talk about two great playwrights of America of 20th century. Now, we are going to look at or talk about the similarities or the differences between the two playwrights. They are Eugene ONeill and Arthur Miller. First of all, I'll try to give a brief introduction of both the playwrights, and then we'll proceed with the comparison. Eugene ONeill, born on October 16, 1888, and died on November 27, 1953, was the first to introduce into American drama techniques of realism, earlier associated with Russian playwright Anton Chekhov, Norwegian playwright Ibsen, and Swedish playwright August Strindberg. His plays were among the first to include speeches in American vernacular and involve characters on the fringes of society where they struggle to maintain their hopes and aspirations, but ultimately slide into disillusionment and despair. ONeill wrote only one comedy, one well-known comedy, and that is A Wilderness. Nearly all his other plays involve some degree of tragedy and personal pessimism. ONeill's first published play, Beyond the Horizon, opened on Broadway in 1920 to great acclaim and was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. His first major hit was The Emperor Jones, which ran on Broadway in 1920, and his best-known plays include Anna Christie, Desire Under the Elms, Strange Interlude, Morning Becomes Electra, The Hairy Ape. Now, he received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1936. After 10 years' pause, ONeill's now renowned play, The Iceman Cometh, was produced in 1946. Now, he was also part of the modern movement to revive the classical heroic mask from ancient Greek theater and Japanese Noh theater in some of his plays, such as The Great God Brown and Lazarus Laughed. The Hairy Ape is a well-known play of Eugene ONeill. It tells the story of a laborer known as Yank as he searches for a sense of belonging in a world controlled by the rich. At first, Yank feels secure as he strokes the engines of an ocean liner and is highly confident in his physical power over the ship's engines. However, when the weak but rich daughter of an industrialist in the steel business refers to him as a filthy beast, Yank undergoes a crisis of identity. He leaves the ship and wanders into Manhattan, only to find he does not belong anywhere, neither with the socialists on the Fifth Avenue, nor with the labor organizers on the waterfront. Finally, he is reduced to seeking a kindred being with the gorilla in the zoo and dies in the animal's embrace. Now, in the same way, when we look at the life of Eugene ONeil, we find that he was a prominent figure in American theater. His career as a writer spanned about 7 decades, and at the time of his death, he was considered to be one of the greatest dramatists of the 20th century. He introduced critical thinking also in the nation, and not just in the dramatic medium. Miller makes the idea of tragedy a very contemporary idea to meet the challenges posed by industrialism, technology, and democracy in mid-20th century. In 1940, Miller wrote The Man Who Had All the Luck, which was produced in New Jersey in 1940 and won the Theatre Guild National Award. In 1946, Miller's play, All My Sons, the writing of which had commenced in 1941, was a success in Broadway, and his reputation as a playwright was established. His popular dramas include plays such as All My Sons, Death of a Salesman, The Crucible, A View from the Bridge. Death of a Salesman was an attack on the American worship of success in the story of an unsuccessful commercial traveler who only on the point of death came to terms with the unsatisfactory nature of his own life. Now let us look at the similarities or differences between these two great American dramatists, Eugene ONeil and Arthur Miller. Now, both were, in a way, belonged to or began writing in the first half of 20th century. And one of the interesting facts is that when Eugene ONeil wrote after World War I, Arthur Miller wrote after World War II. Now we can find that in both the writers, we find the theme of alienation or dislocation. Now, it was not only because of the effects of the war that people were disturbed or upset. Another reason, and a major one too, was that there were changes in the conditions of the country, or you can say changes in the environment, be it political, social, or economical. Now, we find that these two great playwrights, they just wrote or emerged on the dramatic scene of American theater after the wars. Now, the perspective of alienation in the plays of these playwrights is not directly traceable to the wars, as it shows itself in the familial and social condition of industrialist culture of the nation. But it is a fact that wars created a context for the theme of alienation or the element of alienation in drama. Both Miller and ONeil, in their plays, the fundamental dramatic impulse comes from the changing environment of the society, which results in the emergence of sense of alienation among the people. The basic concern of ONeil was the sense of unrelatedness in a fast-changing world, while Miller was concerned with the growing lack of correlation between private and social life. For both the dramatists, shrinking of human experience is a major concern. The difference lies, however, in the fact that the heroes of ONeil experience a detachment with society by an external force, and the characters of Miller realize the lack of interaction between man and society, and throughout, their difference is also rooted in the difference between their times, which demands for a different perspective. Another major characteristic which we find present in the plays of both the playwrights is the factor of the element of social reality. We can say their drama was the drama of social reality. Now, ONeil and Miller's plays, they do reflect a pressure exerted on the dramatic world by the social reality of the times. In ONeil, we see powerful images of miserable situation of working class, while in Miller, we see the immorality at the heart of the industrial world. In his early dramatic career, ONeil considered theater as life, the substance and interpretation of life, and would interpret life in terms of lives, never just lives in terms of character. Miller's idea was that dramatic art must come out of the real lives of people, the present, always the present, to which the dramatic form must apply. And forms do die when they lose their capacity to open up the present. Both the playwrights were motivated by the problems and social concerns of their time. They were always busy busy in deepening their knowledge, extending their knowledge, and understanding human lives, both from the social point of view and psychological point of view. This leads us to another characteristic which we find present in the plays of both the playwrights, that is the psychological point. Now, in the plays of O'Neill as well as Miller, more in Miller's plays, we find an analysis of the psychology of their characters. Or you can say they have made an attempt to probe into the psychology of the characters of their plays. And this was a major factor present in the plays of both the playwrights. Now, we can say O'Neill develops a concern for complexity in human nature, whereas Miller develops a concern for the difficulty of moral choice for man as an essential condition of freedom. The shift towards psychological aspects of human nature was also the result of popularity of Freud's psychoanalysis in America. In Morning Becomes Electra, O'Neill tries to develop modern psychological drama, while Miller's The Crucible deals with the idea of American attitude towards public and private issues. In O'Neill, surface unrealism becomes a tool to uncover inner psychological realism by making characters based on the Freudian concepts. Morning aims to provide a modern psychological closeness or approximation of the Greek sense of fate in a time in which the notion of an inescapable and fundamentally non-redemptive determinism is incomprehensible. Miller also tries to explore the realism through his unreal realism through his play. The general outline of events in The Crucible corresponds to what happened in Salem of 1692, but Miller's characters are often composites. Now, in an odd way, we can say The Crucible is best read outside its historical context, not as a perfect allegory for anti-communism or as a faithful account of the Salem trials, but as a powerful and timeless depiction of how intolerance and hysteria can intersect and tear a community apart. Now, when we talk about the dramatic vision of these two playwrights, we find that the plays of both the writers have characters pursuing the same kind of profession. Now, the Iceman Cometh and Long Day's Journey into Night of O'Neill can be compared to Miller's plays like Death of a Salesman and After the Fall. Both the Iceman Cometh and Death of a Salesman have a salesman as a protagonist, and they both are the champions of American dream. Both the plays deal with the idea that all Americans are salesmen, but there is a difference. Hickey O'Neill's salesman is adrift in universe, while Willie Loman, Miller's salesman, is adrift in contemporary American society. O'Neill examines the American dream at the metaphysical level, while Miller examines the social context of the dream. O'Neill viewed the American dream as an existential predicament, while Miller sees it American failure in mid-20th century. Now, another comparison can be made between O'Neill's Long Day's Journey into Night and Miller's After the Fall, as both the plays and the complete dramatic output of the playwrights are summative in designs. In these plays, we find a shift of focus from the sense of failure towards acknowledgement of one's responsibilities, choices, and guilt. O'Neill presents a tragedy of mutual expectation through familial drama, while Miller cruelties in relationships like marriage and friendship. The format of self-trial is present in both the plays, but the existential strategies which the characters in both the plays adopt are essentially different. Quentin in Miller's play is a lawyer whose primary client is himself. Quentin investigates how things have turned out the way they have from his own perception of truth. Now, he wanted to do good in life, to love and be loved. But his first two marriages ended in divorce, and he betrayed a friend. As the play moves forward and backward in time, Quentin acknowledges his own capacity for cruelty and murder. Not the physical taking of another's life, but the murder of love, his own as well as the love of others. An overriding theme in After the Fall is denial. Quentin learns about denial from considering the impact of the Holocaust. This brings him to the realization that he must face the many ways he has justified or ignored his complicity in the failure of his marriage to Lucy and the death of Maggie. Now, the dramas of both the playwrights are their investigation into man and his relation with society and the effect of this relation on man. Both the dramatists share the existential vision of Camus and Schopenhauer. Now we find another common element, but it is more in O'Neill, and that is autobiographical element. We can say that O'Neill's Long Day's Journey into Night and Miller's After the Fall are autobiographical plays. Long Day's Journey into Night contains certain autobiographical elements which make the play a dramatic story of the playwright's own life. O'Neill, like Edmund, was the child of a Broadway actor. They were Irish Americans, as are the Tyrones. Catholicism looms large in both the families, with a religious father appalled by his son's apparent rejection of the church. O'Neill's father was an alcoholic, and like James Tyrone, he gave up a promising career as a Shakespearean actor for a part in a commercial but artistically worthless play called Monte Cristo. In the play, Tyrone speaks of this commercial success but never names it. O'Neill's mother, in real life, was a morphine addict and, like Mary, became one after the birth of a youngest child, Jamie. Jamie is also molded after O'Neill's real-life brother, a dissolute alcoholic whoremonger who failed miserably at everything he put his hand to. And Eugene had an older brother named Edmund who died as a baby. In the play, the dead middle son is named Eugene. Both O'Neill and Miller contributed to a great extent in fashioning or molding or designing the realistic drama of 20th century American theater. Both the playwrights show a great admiration for Greek tragedy. In their evolution of tragic form of modern drama, O'Neill takes on to the Greek tragic form and shapes it in his plays like Morning Becomes Electra and Desire Under the Elms. Miller also takes the Greek idea of fate in his plays like Death of Salesman. Though the ending of these plays questions and as well as asserts the worth of individual rebel, both O'Neill and Miller believe that an individual has little choice against the forces of nature and society. For both playwrights, tragedy is limitation of an individual against the godlike powers. They were concerned with the question of the possibilities of tragedy in modern society. For them, the answer was yes, but the tragedy in modern society would be a bit different from that of Greek tragedy. The way they explored tragedy gives new dimensions to their realistic tragedies. The ideas of realism and tragedy are based on opposing principles, and both the playwrights gave examples of brilliant dramatic imagination in amalgamating both in their plays. They did not feel restricted by the realistic form of drama and gave themselves liberty of experimenting and exploring, which must be considered as their achievement. Now, American theater was revolutionized by O'Neill and Miller. They made American theater a powerful cultural expression of the time. Now, O'Neill was the first playwright to take American drama to the height of great literature. He made the script and the production of plays very implicit in the very act of writing. Now, we can say that O'Neill's dramas explore his life at sea, his father's disappointments, his mother's drug addiction, his brother's suicide, and his own shortcomings. His plays probe the American dream. Alienation, race relations, class conflicts, sexuality, human aspirations, and disappointment. He wrote about the wealthy and the underclass with equal perception. His plays investigate modern relationships and the human frailties they concern. Similarly, Miller also talks about all these things, all these issues through his plays. Both of them contributed to a great extent in the development of American drama.